Good afternoon. This is Grant Swartzwelder with OTA Environmental Solutions, and welcome to a special edition of Oilfield Strong. There's been quite a change that was just announced on Friday where the EPA is going to have major effects on the greenhouse gas reporting program and the Subpart W aspect of that for the oil industry. Have two experts here to discuss what that means to oil and gas companies. Lee Fuller is with the IPAA and is a regulatory environmental expert that works with them. And then Luis Vasquez is the Vice President of Environmental Services for OTA Environmental Solutions. And so he understands how this affects the individual companies. Lee, tell us what's going on.
Well, this package that was announced on Friday has been rumored for quite a while. It's a very major action with respect to the future of the greenhouse gas reporting program. EPA is essentially terminating that program. If you look at the history of the greenhouse gas reporting program, it was never constructed through an authorized bill. There is no Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program Act. Instead, it was a rider in an appropriations bill. And if you generally look at those kinds of actions, they really only have authority for the fiscal year in which they are included in that appropriations bill. Since then, EPA has been continuing the program and expanding it enormously through general authority under its enforcement sections of the Clean Air Act. This proposal is saying essentially that's not a legitimate way to set up this program, that the enforcement actions are not sweeping enough to allow for this major program to be initiated and or continued for the past couple of decades. So it's ending it in its proposal, which will be published in the Federal Register and go through a comment period, and then final action will take place, and it will likely be litigated. Among the elements of the greenhouse gas reporting program is Subpart W, which applies to oil and natural gas facilities. But it has a different status than the rest of the segments of the GRGRP because it is a part or referenced as a part of the Inflation Reduction Act from a couple of years ago when the methane tax was created. And as a result, EPA can't just discontinue it as a part of this proposal. So it has to keep it in place. But what it's proposing in this package is to essentially shut down the reporting part of that program until the methane tax becomes live again, which is in roughly 2034, I believe,
Right.
as a result of the enactment of changes to the Inflation Reduction Act, general repeal of it, earlier this year. Now, that doesn't mean that it necessarily will disappear from EPA's radar, because there's also a regulatory action that it took prior to the legislative action that ended or suspended the methane tax, and that was a revision to Subpart W to theoretically make it more empirically accurate. And that package has now been listed as one that's subject for reconsideration. So we're continuing to work with EPA on specific structures of Subpart W, but if this proposal goes through, essentially the reporting process of it will be suspended until the methane tax is reinstated in 2034.
You talk about comments and litigation. What's the likelihood of this actually happening?
Well, that's a good question, Grant. If you look at the way this law, or the way this reporting program was created in an appropriations bill, I've always thought that there's a jeopardy for the agency because they're having to rely on interpretations of their enforcement authority to keep it running and to actually build it out. So I think administration has strong, background or basis to argue that it doesn't really have that authority, and that's probably uh, one of the things that I don't know if they've referenced it here, but the litigation of the Loper litigation and the EPA versus West Virginia litigation of a couple of years ago that went to the Supreme Court, where they said that Congress needs to be very explicit about the kinds of things that EPA has the authority to implement. Probably will probably come into play in this regulatory initiative as well.
Obviously, filling out the greenhouse gas, all the forms, takes a lot of time, requires a lot of data. Louise, what does this mean for the oil and gas companies that have been responding to these requirements of the GHG?
Well, Grant, good to be here. Nice to see you again, Lee. So as far as the pros for operators, well, I guess everybody can tell it's going to be a reduced regulatory burden. It's going to be less paperwork, less reporting obligations, which translates to some operators, be the small, medium size that are applicable to GHG, but have a smaller team. The cost for consulting expenses for the greenhouse gas report to be completed by a third party is going to be reduced. So I would see that it would be less costly. And then they may be able to invest their time in other areas where if they are tracking, let's say operators do track internal measurements of certain emissions, well, now they can use the time that they were using for the greenhouse gas reporting to track those that kind of matter more to them case by case, because the greenhouse gas reporting may have been a one size fits all type of a rule. So now they can focus in on what matters to them. The cons to the removal or the delay of the greenhouse gas reporting for the for oil and gas sectors is they may have a loss of the differentiation. So the greenhouse gas reporting program allowed for, it had standards and allowed for benchmarking, and you're familiar through ESG about the benchmarking, right? The delay or removal of this reporting is going to prevent the standard and data capture where these benchmarkings could be completed from. You may have some producers that invested heavily on low emission tech, leak detection, clean operations, or changes in their operations. And now they're losing that platform to actually prove that their efforts are actually doing what they intended them to do. So it'll be harder for them to stand out from their competitors from that standard based platform.
No, that's a great point, Louise. But so it's y'all's thought that really the operator does not need to obviously fill out the greenhouse gas. They don't need to get the data that is associated with that. This is just at a standstill until 2034. Right?
At the federal level, yeah, that would be true. Now, some states may have programs that are built off of Subpart W, and they may continue those requirements. I don't have a familiarity with the extent to which they do have done that separately relative to just using the information from the greenhouse gas reporting program. But I think, as Luis was saying, a number of companies have used it for things like their ESG initiatives, and they'll have to decide how they want to pursue that going forward, given that it won't have the public exposure that's submitting it under the greenhouse gas reporting program has now.
I think that point about the states is very critical, but you could expand it to Quad OA, Quad OB, LDAR. Does this affect any of those other things, Louise?
Well, those are different regulations, but they do they do tie into methane, which is a greenhouse gas. So I would, it would take a different action from what I suspect, but there is a tie in there given methane. Lee brought up a good point about the states. Removing the EPA greenhouse gas reporting program may cause blue states to go further and pick up where the EPA has left off when it comes to greenhouse gases.
So the main point here is be aware of what your state is requiring, where the production is, but then also Quad OA, LDAR, those things haven't changed. Those continue on.
Correct.
Is that fair, Louise, Lee?
Yes, I mean, certainly the regulatory programs, so the ones that are in existence now, Quad O, Quad OA, Quad OB, and then of course, we'll see what happens with the existing source regulations under Quad OC emissions guidelines. Those are also under reconsideration by EPA and can create, there could be some significant changes coming forward there over the next year or so. And of course, all of this is going to be litigated again. So some of these things that appear to be actions that have a permanence to them in the way they're being proposed may not disappear as quickly, depending upon the way the litigation is treated by the courts, whether they allow the changes to go into effect or whether they suspend them.
So specifically on that, the deadline for filing this is when, Louise? End of October?
No, for greenhouse gas reporting, it's going to be March 31st, but
Okay.
there has been an extension into June, and that's just to give a little bit extra time if for the delaying of the greenhouse gas reporting. It's an extension on the reporting, but it also serves as an extension or additional time for them to get the to process what their the actions they need to delay it or to remove it.
So that should give companies time to understand whether things flip back around where it is required and have time to actually file that. So, okay. Well, good, guys. Really appreciate it. IPAA is always fantastically helpful for the industry, and Lee is a wealth of knowledge and has really helped so many companies navigate this. And I'm sure IPAA is more than open to, if you've got additional questions, to get with them. Louise with OTA Environmental Solutions, I assume very available to help any company with questions they might have on filing of this or anything else like Quad OA or LDAR. Thank you very much, and appreciate y'all listening to this Oilfield Strong edition.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grant.